Hello and welcome back to the Money Bear podcast. I'm your host, Chloe Daniels, better known as Chloe Bear Money Coach on the internet. And this is the podcast where we get bear about money. So welcome. Pull up a seat. I hope you are ready. It feels like I haven't done any podcast recordings in a while because like the entire month of October I was traveling, and now it's October 26th as I'm filming this. I'm back in my parents' hometown and I just kind of feel like it's been a whirlwind of a month, and I can't even fathom the fact that my road trip around the country is over. Like, I've been traveling since April and living out of a car, not really living out of a car. I was going to Airbnbs, but I was constantly moving, putting my stuff into the car and pulling it back out. And it was exhausting. It was incredible. It was amazing. And I'm so grateful that I got to do all of that. But holy crap, that was so tiring. Even as I'm saying it, I'm like, I'm so tired. But anyway, that's kind of what is going on in my life right now. I'm just kind of readjusting to being back in Peoria. I am planning on moving to San Diego sometime next year. I'm not entirely sure when that's going to be. Originally, I was thinking January, but honestly, the idea of moving as soon as January is just stressing me out. So I have to keep reminding myself that there is no timeline and I don't have to move out there in January if that stresses me out. So right now, honestly, just because I feel like my business has kind of taken a back seat for a while, I'm just excited to get back to it and to really dive into some of the content, creation, and all that fun stuff, and get consistent with things like YouTube and blogging again and stuff like that. I have these big dreams of redesigning my blog. So that's what I'm hoping to achieve in the next couple of months. And I think that's why January seems too soon for me to move to San Diego. So we'll see what happens. But that's kind of where my headspace is at right now. Things in Peoria are pretty cozy. It's fall, so the leaves are insane colors. And I'm just honestly, I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to not be alone anymore and to be like hanging out with my family and to have my dog and have the cats and have Logan getting to hang out with her Aunt Rue, aka my parents' dog. So yeah, I feel tired. And I know a lot of people feel that way in fall, so it's normal. But anyway, I'm not going to do a long intro today just because like I feel like I'm adjusting and I feel a little bit brain dead. So we're going to dive right in. I promise you we'll get back to the money tips of the week, but today we're just going to dive right into our episode. So today we've got Diana. Diana is an incredible human being that I met at FinCon, and she is the founder of Econome. So today, which is sorry, I should probably explain what Econome is, right? See, I told you guys I'm brain dead. Econome is a super cool personal finance conference that is geared towards helping people achieve financial independence. And I love it. I think that's an incredible thing to have in the space. And I don't think I've ever heard of anything quite like it before. So I'm excited to share not only more about Econome, but also Diana's journey into financial independence and how she chooses to do it on her own accord, on her own time, in her own way. So let's get to it. But before we do, be sure to hit subscribe, leave us a little quick review and rating. It keeps us going. And if we know that you like what we're doing, we're going to keep doing it. So appreciate you taking the time to do that. But let's get to it. Welcome back to the Money Bear podcast. Today we've got my friend Diana on, who is the founder of the Econome Conference, and we're going to dive in and talking to her about founding that conference as well as what her money journey was along the way. Welcome, Diana.
Thanks so much for having me.
Of course. I'm super excited for selfish reasons, honestly, to talk to you today. Because one, I'm excited to meet you. We've got a mutual friend who you all know if you're listening, Money Honey Rachel. And I'm also just so curious what it's like to start a whole freaking conference. So I can't wait. But before we dive in, kind of give us your elevator speech. Tell us who you are and where people can find you.
Sure. So, as you mentioned, I founded the Econome Conference. I'm also the host of the Optimal Finance Daily podcast. So, this is actually a daily narration style show where I read to you from popular personal finance bloggers every single day in 10 minutes or less. So I like to say these bloggers wrote these like amazing songs and I get to perform the covers, which is super fun. But yeah, between those two things, that's kind of what I'm doing with my time these days.
Oh my gosh, I love that idea for a podcast because it's like, as a personal finance like expert, nerd, whatever, you're getting to stay up on what people are talking about, but
Yep.
also you're turning it into content. That's freaking genius.
Yeah, it's great. We've got about 200 contributors to the show, and so we get all of their permission to just like source any article. And this show has actually been around for, I want to say, 8 years now. I've actually been the host for the last 2 years, so I was hired basically as the talent for the show, so that like knowing you like produce a podcast yourself, you know how difficult it can be and all like the moving parts. I'm very spoiled because basically all I do is record, and then the producers like do all of the hard work. So
Oh my gosh, I love that. Actually, for those, this is behind the scenes secret. That's kind of what I do as well. Except
awesome.
I didn't get hired. This podcast, I have a podcast production team who does literally everything for me. I just have to like find the people I want to interview. They'll even schedule the interviews most of the time, and they do all the editing and all the like the
Oh, you
videos.
get
And
it.
I was like, the only way I will ever start a podcast if the only thing I have to do is talk to my friends.
Yes. Love it.
Like,
Perfect.
so that's all I want to do. So luckily, Elevate. Shout out to Elevate, who is editing this right now. It's been a good experience. So for you, I actually remember seeing your it wasn't a TikTok, it was a reel. Jeremy had posted a reel of like all the people that he was interviewing at FinCon. And it was so funny because he goes, "Are you a financial expert?" And you go, "Well, I don't know if I'm an expert." You were like, "I'm a financial fanatic," or something along those lines. And I thought
Yes.
that was hilarious because you totally are an expert. But how did you get into personal finance? Like, tell us a little bit about what your money journey has been and kind of like what was money like growing up for you and what made you become a fanatic.
Sure. So, yeah, I identify as a personal finance enthusiast because I feel like there's a lot of criticism out there for content creators who like don't have their CFP or like credentials to talk about money. Though I would argue that like there is no replacement for self-education, and so everyone should become their own personal finance enthusiast or expert or fanatic or whatever you want to call it. But
Mm-hmm.
for me, growing up, my mom was the breadwinner of my family. And so I think that was pretty influential for me. Like she always instilled in me, like I remember being a kid, and I don't know why she was so forceful about this. I mean, now that I'm an adult, I can kind of look back on it with a different perspective. But at the time when I was a kid, she would say things like, "Don't you ever let a man take care of you." Like she really like drilled it into my head that like as a woman you have to have your own money. Like it's super important, especially as a woman, to have your own money. Of course everyone needs to have their own money, right? And so in my mind, I was always like very keen to like be independent, make my own money. I would say that she didn't teach me as much about money as I wish she would have because entering my 20s was definitely financially illiterate. I really only focused on income. That's what I thought. Like I had in my mind, if I could make six figures before 30, that would mean that I'm doing well financially, which I did. But what I wasn't paying attention to is my expenses and the debt that I was racking up. And so what
Mm-hmm.
I've learned about money since then is that the gap between your income and your expenses, that's where you build wealth. Like that is the metric that matters more than income. Not that income doesn't matter at all. Obviously, it's relevant, it's a part of the equation. But if you can focus on the gap between your income and your expenses, that can change everything. And that's what
Mm-hmm.
happened for me. Once I learned that and learned more about different ways to think about money, when I was 28 years old, I was 30 grand in debt for no reason. I ran a credit report on myself, which is the only way that I like knew I was even 30 grand in debt because I was just kind of mindlessly paying my credit cards. I had some student loans,
Mm-hmm.
just literally was not paying attention at all. And so once I ran that credit report, it was like a slap in the face, like, man, you are 30 grand in debt. How did this happen? Right.
Right.
And so I had this ambition for my 30th birthday to walk the Camino de Santiago in Spain, which for those who aren't familiar, it's a 500-mile trek across Spain. I had to take off 2 months of work to do it. And so for me to take off 2 months of work, first of all, I had no examples of anyone ever taking a sabbatical. So I didn't even know
Right.
that was something I could ask for. So I assumed I'd have to quit my job. And in order to quit my job, I was going to need to have some financial bandwidth to like figure things out, right? To fund the trip, but also to have some, a safety net for myself in trying to find another job or what was next for me. And so I ended up stumbling on the Mr. Money Mustache blog when I was thinking about all this stuff. And
That's like the OG, like fire
oh
guy.
yeah.
If it's Mr. Money Mustache, for those who are listening, if you guys are curious about financial independence, retire early, he's like the GOAT.
Oh yeah. He retired at like 30 years old because he saved 75% of his income while he was working. And when you first hear that, it sounds cuckoo bananas, right? You're just like,
Mm-hmm.
what the hell? This guy was obviously like eating rice and beans and depriving himself, and that doesn't seem like any way to live. But
Mm-hmm.
when you change your mindset around money, and like for me, a big shift was realizing that the best things in life are free. Like when
Mm-hmm.
you stop becoming so materialistic, it's actually really easy to save money.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was a big shift for me. I ended up getting out of 30 grand of debt in 11 months. And from there, I started saving and investing about 60% of my income, and it changed everything for me.
Dang, that's wild. So when, like, ages wise, what was the timeline for you, like from when you were growing up, obviously, and your mom was like, I love, first of all, that your mom was like, don't ever rely on a man. It's like, thank you, yes. And then you go into like hyper, like independence mode. But it's funny when our parents give us advice where it's like, okay, but there's no follow through. And you're like, what? But how do we do that? What are the things, like, what are the steps that I need to take? And so that we do end up in debt or confused, but knowing that we're supposed to be doing this one thing. So for you, what was like that timeline age wise? I'm just curious.
Yeah. So I was 28 when I kind of came to and had the
Mm-hmm.
realization that I was 30 grand in debt. I got out of debt, less than a year later. So that's 29. And then between 29 and 33 was when I was saving that 60% of my income. And at 33, so that was almost 2 years ago now, I actually quit my W-2 job. So I'm not financially independent in the traditional sense of like having 25 times your yearly expenses, but I did reach Coast Fi status, which
Mm-hmm.
means that if I don't contribute even one more dollar to my retirement accounts, I will have enough, like it will grow through the power of compound interest to what I need at traditional retirement age. So I look at that as like I front loaded my retirement savings, and I gave myself the option to downshift a lot earlier in life, right? So
Right.
now my only source of income is actually from podcasting. So I mentioned the podcast that Optimal Finance Daily. I actually do a second series of daily shows where I'm reading horoscopes, which that's straight voice acting. Like I read it in this kind of like sultry voice, you know.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so between those two shows, or like the horoscopes, it's actually a series of 12 shows, but I record it like each day. It takes me about half an hour to record 12 shows because they're only like 2 to 3 minutes a piece. And
Yeah.
so between those two shows, that's 8 hours of work a week. And that covers all of my expenses and then some. So
That's amazing.
yes.
And like that's the power of that Coast Fire is like you have options all of a
Yep.
sudden. You don't have to work for money, or you don't have to work for your investments. You got to work for just your living expenses. So
Exactly.
when you reached Coast Fi, did you stop investing as much as you were investing? I'm assuming you're not investing 60% of your income now, or are you still
No.
investing that much?
Well, my income dropped about 100 grand when I left my job. And so
Mhm.
that's a huge hit. Like the first year, I didn't think I was going to be able to invest anything. But I ended up picking up a couple consulting projects. Like cash flow was a little bit better than I expected it to be. So I
Mhm.
actually invested 10 grand last year. Like
Nice.
I fully funded my Roth, and then I did my HSA. And that year I anticipated not being able to invest anything.
Right.
And this year, I think I'll do the same. I think when you get in the habit of saving and investing, especially because like I'm not drawing down from my portfolio. And if I have extra money, it's like, where am I going to put it? I might as
Right.
well invest it, right? If I don't need it anytime soon. And so, yeah, especially on the Roth, like that's just something where like if I'm not going to do a conversion, I might as well do a contribution.
Right. And it's that you kind of answered the question that I was going to ask next is I feel like if I decided to just slow down on investing, there would still, even knowing that I'm at Coast Fi, I feel like there would be a little bit of anxiety of like, oh gosh, am I doing it right? Because like when you're going that intense for even 3, 4 years, which is when you were saving that 60%, it'd be really, really hard to switch gears and just be like, no, it's
Yeah.
okay. I've done the math. I've front loaded. Did you feel a little bit of that when you were really
Yes.
shifting gears?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
here's the thing that I have had to like have quite the evolution with my relationship with money through this process. Like when I first discovered the FIRE movement, I was trying to like be Mr. Money Mustache. I was trying to like copy what he did. I think a lot of people in the movement are on this like just race to financial
Mhm,
independence, and they think that when they reach this magical number, all of a sudden that's when the options open up. And
mhm,
in my situation, like I just realized that even though I was on track to reach 5 by 40, which I'm 35 now, when I really started to analyze all the reasons why I wanted to be financially independent, it mostly revolved around having full autonomy over my time. It's not
yep,
about not working. And I think for most people, it's not about not working. It's about separating your finances from your work. There's a
mhm,
huge distinction there. And so once I got some clarity around that, I realized that like I can have all of the benefits of a financially independent life without actually being through
mhm,
self-employment and entrepreneurship. Now, I know that that's not for everyone, but I think it's really powerful to recognize that when you're like past debt freedom, when you're past saving for your emergency fund, when you're past Coast Fi, when you have FU money, when you like reach these milestones on the path to like full financial independence, options open up for you along the way. And one thing I like to challenge people on is like, what if you didn't need more money? You actually just needed more creativity and more
mm,
imagination. Because I think most of us in the FIRE movement already have enough money to not have to tolerate a less than optimal work situation. But a lot of people don't feel that way, right? Like when I was quitting my job and I sent a newsletter out to my mailing list, I would get these notes of like, oh man, I'm 2 years away from FI and I'm so miserable and I hate my job, but I'm just gonna like suck it up to like get through these last 2 years. And in my mind, it's like you have way too much money to be that miserable. You know,
yes,
like even if you slowed it down, like I don't know if you're familiar with like slow fi or the pioneers
mhm,
or kind of that new flavor of fi. I feel like that is more my style now,
mhm,
where, you know, it's not enough to just reach financial independence or just make money. I
mhm,
want to make money in line with my values. And I want to like ask myself really deep questions about how I want to use my time. What do I want to create in the world? Who do I want to spend that time with? Those are actually much harder questions to answer than how do I reduce my expenses more? How do I increase my income? How do I invest more and have a higher savings rate? Like those
right.
questions, I feel like if you're going to get the full emotional benefits of pursuing financial independence, you've got to evolve past those.
I totally agree, and I love hearing it because I think FI is really great for like getting people started and like getting you excited about the possibility of retiring. And I think it is important for all of us to be financially independent at some point. But I think that what you said, it's not about working. I'm over here like taking notes of like this is where I want to reel because I'm like, yes, exactly. This is what I love. But it's so true. It's like the ability to have an option on what you do and how you want to spend your time. Whether or not that makes you money is great, but it's like that option to add more value into your life. And I think even when people are struggling with the day to day of managing their expenses, it's often because they don't have that dream. Because it's like, yeah, of course, we all want to keep the lights on. We all want to save. We all want to be able to retire someday. But if those things don't excite you, which most people aren't just excited just about the activity of maxing out an HSA, it's about the why behind it. And it's like
Yeah.
keeping that front and center of like, what do I actually want? But what I have found in, the people that I've coached, and I'll be curious if you found this too through your podcasting and your other mediums, is that a lot of people don't know what they would do or what they do
No.
really want and what they do really value. And once you add money to the equation and it's like you have enough money, and now this question of like, who do you want to be arises, it's this incredible opportunity to figure that out.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I think if you're miserable before FI, you're going to be miserable afterwards. Like FI is
Yes.
just a life circumstance and money is just a tool. It's not the
Hmm.
goal. I think that's the other thing that there's a lot of confusion around money, that like our goal is to just like accumulate this massive money and then sit on this pile of money, and that's going to make us feel better for the rest of our lives. Like I like to
Right.
look at money like money is like a hammer, right? And when what we talk about in personal finance is like, how do you acquire the hammer? What
Hmm.
features the hammer has? Where are you going to store the hammer? And we put it in these beautiful boxes and we bejewel these boxes and we're so proud of like our investment portfolio. But at the end of the day, if you never swing that hammer and like build something with it, what's the point of even having it, right? I mean,
Yeah.
we do have a certain need for financial security. But I mean, I've got a year of expenses in cash in the bank. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Like I'm pretty good on like what do I need for financial security if like the shit hits the fan, right?
Right.
That you have to also like really question how much is enough. Because
Yeah.
what I've learned about money is it's really only as valuable as your clarity on how you're going to use it, which is what you're talking about, and also your comfort level of how much is enough. I know
Hmm.
people who have $10 million and they're still so stuck in a scarcity mindset that they're afraid to spend any of it.
Yep.
That's a whole nother problem, right?
Hmm. Yep. Do you listen to Ramit's podcast?
I have, yes.
It always blows my mind when he's got people on there who are like, they have like a $12 million net worth and they're still standing in line at the last minute tickets on Broadway. And one of the things that I love that he told this particular couple was he was like, you do realize like now that you're a wealthy human being, it's kind of your responsibility to spend this money. Like it's your responsibility to not be
Yeah.
sitting in that last minute tickets Broadway line because you're taking away from like the mom with a high schooler who this is the only way that she can afford tickets on Broadway. And I think that's so true. And I think that's been one of the criticisms of the FIRE movement of talking about, and I don't necessarily fully agree with the criticisms of the FIRE movement, but I think there is some truth of that when you restrict, 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 and you put these parameters in place and then you get to the goal, it's really hard for some people to switch those gears, like we mentioned earlier. And that's, I think with Mr. Money Mustache, I think he's fantastic in terms of like getting people started and really getting people to think about money in a new way and think about what they want in love in a new way. But I do think there's a little bit of that, like, oh, I'm afraid to spend money, like I'm like
Right.
unwilling to spend money. So I
Yeah,
think
and I
finding that balance is important.
totally. It's all to me, it's all the emotion behind it, right?
Hmm.
Like if you are not spending money out of a sense of fear, that's
Hmm.
one thing. But like for example, I drive a 2010 Mazda 3 that I bought for $6,000 cash. Is that
Hmm.
me depriving myself because I could afford something more extravagant? No. Like I think that there's a balance between like again aligning your spending with your values. I don't value a nice car, so I'm
Hmm.
not going to spend my money there. I do value like travel and going to events, so I spend a ton of money there, right?
Hmm.
And so I think it really all boils down to like the feeling behind it. Are you not
100%.
spending out of a sense of fear, or is this self-imposed restriction actually a freeing thing, right? So, like, for example, my expenses are like $2,000 a month, right? That is super low. And a lot of
Yeah.
people would say that, like, that probably sounds like I'm depriving myself. Now, I live in Cincinnati, which I think is the absolute best city to pursue FI because of the low cost of living. But I bought my one that it's like 1,100 square feet, this house. My mortgage
Hmm.
is $600 a month. And I have me, my fiance, his son, a 90-pound dog, and two cats in this house. It's cozy, but I love it. Like, this is my preference. It's not like I chose this just because I was trying to save money. This is actually
Yes.
my preference, right? Yeah.
Exactly. And again, going back to knowing what you actually value and what you actually want, it's so key. I love
Yeah.
that. That's so cool. $600 a month. That's freaking mind blowing.
Isn't it
I'm,
amazing? I know. And I
yeah.
used to live in New York City. So I was paying like $1,800 a month for a cockroach-filled apartment in the bowels of Brooklyn to like, this is the nicest house I've ever lived in my life. I mean, it's amazing to me.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. I'm over here getting ready to move to San Diego and I'm looking at spending like $3,000 a month
Oh
on
yeah.
rent. And I used to live in Chicago where rent's pretty cheap for the amount that you get for it, where it's like I was spending like $1,500, not even. And now I'm like, okay, we're just gonna go casually double that.
Yeah.
But
Oh yeah.
it's intentional. It's a high
Yep.
value thing for me where it's like I had to have that moment where I was like, what do I really want to spend my money on? And I was like, I would literally be willing to cut back on everything else if I ever needed to in order to live in San Diego. And it's so
Amazing.
it's that intention behind it of like, what do I actually want and what does this life look like? So I love that. I absolutely love that. So you run now a conference for money nerds called Econome. What exactly inspired you to pursue that? I'm assuming this is something because this is a relatively new conference. So it came after you quit your job and achieved Co-Spy, right?
So I
Oh,
got the idea for it. I started working on it in the summer of 2018. I quit my job in
oh,
January of 2021. So it took me 20 months to produce my first event, which the first event was in March of 2020, like literally 1 week before everything shut down.
you got so
Insane.
lucky.
I know. I feel like I dodged a bullet. And
Yeah.
then the second event was in November of 2021. So
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the bulk of like creating the business and launching the first event was while I was working full time. And I actually think that helped me a lot because I had such a large savings rate. I actually took a 40 grand loss on my first event. And that 40 grand is what I would have put in my after tax brokerage that year. So I was still fully funding my retirement vehicles at like around 29 grand a year. And that 40 grand would have been what I put in my after tax brokerage. So instead, I invested it in my own business. Right.
I
So
love
it's
that.
still an investment. At the time, it felt like a loss. Depending on when you talk to me, it's an investment or it's a loss. But I think like if you're interested in entrepreneurship, the FIRE movement should be very relevant to you because when you have such a high savings rate, you can reach certain financial goals faster and have more bandwidth to take risks. I mean, launching a conference is a huge risk, right? I mean, the margins are slim. I don't recommend to anyone to launch a conference to try to make money. Like it's just, it will be 5 years before I make a dime off of this business. And so
Dang.
yeah, it is a huge undertaking. COVID didn't do us any favors either. Like the world shutting down from a pandemic, could have never seen that coming. But even so, like you got to look at the events business, like the restaurant business. It could take you 3 to 5 years to break even. It's just that, it's that difficult. But really what inspired me is there's this other event that I love to go to called the World Domination Summit, which sounds insane, like Pinky and the Brain produce it or something, right? But Mr. Money Mustache actually spoke at that event in 2016 and he blogged about it, which is how I found out about it. And he, where was I going with that? Okay, so he spoke in 2016. I went for the first time in 2017. And it really blew my mind because like 2,000 people go to this event. The ticket's kind of expensive, like $700 a ticket for someone like me who's pretty frugal and saves such a large percentage of their income. And that didn't include any food, no travel, no accommodations, like just the ticket was $700.
Yeah.
But when I would leave that event, I probably went 4 or 5 times. And it's over now. This year was they had a 10-year run, and this is like the last year that they did it. I know. So you guys will never experience the magic of World
literally.
Domination.
As soon as you said that, so one of the things that I'm trying to do this year is find another conference to go to that's outside of finance. Like I want to go to like an entrepreneurs conference or something like that. So as soon as you said the World Domination Conference, I was like, yeah, wrote it down. I was like, let me look this up, but that's okay. I'll find another one. Anyway, continue.
Yes. So every time I would leave this event, I would feel like my life is so full of possibility. And it's just because I'm surrounding myself with people that are living really expansive lives. So you almost like get that energy through osmosis. And I would just get flooded with ideas and inspiration and meet really badass people that were asking themselves these deeper questions that we talked about earlier. And so
Hmm.
I really wanted to create something that was like World Domination Summit, but specifically about money. I wanted people to leave feeling like their life was so full of possibility due to their financial situation. And so
Hmm.
that's really how Econome came to be.
And so is Econome, is it like creator focused, or is it anyone who is interested in finance focused?
Yeah, it is not creator focused at all. I would
Gotcha.
describe it more like it's the TED Talks of the FIRE movement. So if you are like reading the blogs, listening to the podcasts, reading the books, then and you are like a fan of the content and you want to expand on that, it's for you. Really the point of Econome is community. If I had to sum
Mm,
it up in one word, it's community. Because what is the point of retiring early if you have no one to hang out with? Right?
1
So
million
like
percent.
I just changed the tagline of the event to "Fi is better with friends." All
I
of my
love
circle of
that.
influence right now, like all of my people that I talk to every single day and hang out with are people that I met at Fi events. Like my best friend, we go long distance hiking every weekend. We will float down the Miami River on a lazy Tuesday afternoon because she's the only person that I know that has full autonomy over her time. She retired from Kroger at like 34 years old. And so
Dang.
yeah. And so, like, she's the one that's like helping me when I was deciding to quit my job. I was like following in her footsteps. So she like nerded out over my spreadsheet with me and like helped me like figure out my numbers. Like, she's the people you meet in the FI community are the smartest, most authentic, generous, creative people you will ever meet in your life. Like, I would never talk to my mom, for instance, about my decision to quit my job at 33 years old. But all
Hmm.
my five friends were like, yeah, you're in the financial position to do it. Let's do some fear setting. Let's go through worst case scenario. Let's run some numbers. Let's see what happens if you move this over there. And, like these are the kind of people that are really going to support you on this journey. And my path to FI got exponentially better once I started tapping into the community. So, really,
Yes.
first and foremost, it's the community and also it's inspiration. Because, when you first discover the FIRE movement, most of us are really gung ho, right? And it's really fun to like reduce your expenses and increase your income and figure out your investment strategy and all of that. But when you're in like the middle, the boring middle, when you're in your accumulation phase and you're just like buying your rental properties, throwing money at, index funds, it's like after you've optimized everything, there's not that much to do aside from wait. And
Right.
so I really like to bring in content that is unexpected, that will help you learn something new, or like I like to say, fuel your fire. Like get that
Hmm.
motivation back that you had in the beginning to like why this is such a life-changing movement.
Oh, I love that. That's so cool. And like you said, I think a lot of us, when it's exactly what you said. In the beginning, we get so excited and fired up and ready to do it. But a lot of us, financial independence, it takes years, if not decades. So it's like to
Yeah.
find something that keeps that feeling going where you want to keep doing it or potentially accelerate it. That's incredible. I love that. So for you, when you were setting up this conference, what were some of the biggest challenges you hit along the way? I assume
Oh
COVID was
man.
probably one of the biggest.
Definitely. When you start something from scratch, obviously other conferences exist, right? And so I have the benefit of like finding really amazing mentors. But also, I wasn't starting from the same place they were starting at. So, like, I just feel like when you do anything entrepreneurial, so many people are going to tell you what they think about it and give you advice and, like, just do what I did. And what I realized is like none of that worked for me. Um, I feel like a lot of the key challenges were not really understanding my mission and who I was here to serve. So I thought that I was going to be contributing to financial literacy, like a lot of content creators in the personal finance space, right? We're talking about money, we're contributing to financial literacy. I'm not doing that with Econome, right? Like if you're at the begin, if you're financially illiterate, I hope, and you're in debt, I hope you're not spending money to come to Econome, right?
Right.
There are so many free resources. There are books. You can get access to so much information online. You don't need Economy for financial literacy.
Right.
Also, I thought that, I hosted at the University of Cincinnati. I spent thousands of dollars the first year, and so much time marketing this to students, because a lot of us in the fire movement wish we would have known about this when we were younger, and realized that that is not my audience. Students do not care.
Right.
They do not
Yeah.
care at all.
They got so
Yeah.
much going on right now, like financial independence is something they're gonna. That's I love that you said that, because I think that's an interesting result. Is I think so many of us say that exactly what you're saying. It's like, this should have been taught in high school. This should have been taught in grade school. This should have been
Yeah.
taught in college. But I think you're hitting something on the head here. Is like, we wouldn't have cared. Like, we wouldn't have cared in high school.
Yeah.
We wouldn't have even cared in college. If anybody, I would have thought maybe college. But even then, it probably would have been basic financial literacy. It probably wouldn't have been like inspirational, you can retire early stuff.
Right. And it's
Mhm.
I just think you need to experience some financial pain before you develop a really deep interest and drive in this topic. And
Right.
so, I remember speaking to a group of college students, because I was on this speakers bureau to go to different universities. And I went down to Atlanta, and I was speaking to this group of students, and I was giving them all my best stuff. It was everything I wish I knew about money when I was your age. And at the end, one student was just like, "Oh, thank you so much. That was great." And I was like, "Really? Because two of you fell asleep, and I don't feel like you guys were interested in this at all. What do I just suck, or what's the problem here? What do I have to lose?" Right. And so
Right.
the one kid was like, "No, this is it is really helpful, but my parents are paying for everything right now. And I don't feel like I can apply anything that you're saying. And I don't
Yeah.
even understand my student loans, and it just doesn't feel urgent." And
Yeah.
so I just, so anyway, my first year, I guest lectured on campus 30 days, every single day, 30 days leading up to the event. I hired an on-campus communications agency. We flooded the campus with flyers and posters. We gave away free tickets, sponsored tickets, volunteer opportunities. I went hard marketing to students,
Wow.
and I had less than 30 show up. It was such a waste of effort, but I wouldn't have known if I didn't
Yeah.
try. Right. So I
Right.
feel like a lot of the stuff that was difficult about building the conference at first is that you make plans based on assumptions. And then as you go and execute on those plans, you realize that all of your assumptions are wrong, but you
Right.
won't know that until you try,
Yep. Yep. And that's the thing with entrepreneurship in general. This could be this is applicable to literally any new endeavor you're trying to do. Is like, you're not going to know until you try or do a little bit of market research to figure out what the heck people actually want and who those people are. So that's really interesting. But you know what? Now you have a very clear idea of who
Yes.
you're helping, I'm sure.
Absolutely. Well, and that's kind of I talk to people when they're like, "Oh, I'm starting this business and I came up with this archetype of my customer, and I'm going to market to this person." And granted, I'm sure that works for some people. It did not work for me. I think I wish someone would have said to me in the beginning, create something that you would actually buy, get it out there in the way that makes the most sense to you, attract an audience, and then ask them who they are. That's the
Yes.
way that I would approach it now, because if you look at my demographics, and I do a post-event survey, and I collect a lot of demographic info from the audience. 20% of my audience is over 50. I would have never seen that coming, but it kind of makes sense, because a portion of them are financially independent and retired. That overlaps with the 20% of my audience who is already FI, but they're coming to help the community. That really aligns with the generous side of the fire movement. But if you are 40, 50 years old and you haven't started saving for retirement, you need the aggressiveness of the fire movement to ever retire, right? So it does
That's so
appeal to
true.
those people. What was the other thing that surprised me? I think that was recognizing that it's an older demographic. It's not students. 70% of my audience is in the accumulation phase. They're knee deep. They're out of debt. When we did the first year, I did a presentation on student loan debt with the student loan planner, thinking this was going to help students, right? Because I thought I was going to have students. We had a thing that you could answer a survey live, like at the event. And I asked the entire audience, like, who here has student loan debt? Literally no one in the audience had student loan debt. Yeah.
What?
So like, I know that that content was
That's
relevant. I know, right? That content was relevant for like my YouTube channel and maybe people that can't afford to go to the event. Like I do still have some content that's relevant for people outside of the people sitting in the room. But it was like, okay, my audience is actually a lot more financially savvy than I thought they were. Right?
Yeah, that would be
in the accumulation phase, and they're thinking deeply about money and life. They need something beyond how do I build a budget?
Yep. Yeah. That makes sense. That makes sense because the FIRE community is people who are financially literate. Like they are the people who are now looking, they're like the next level. And it's like, the people I help generally are the ones who are getting there. And then eventually they figure out like, maybe I could retire early. I love that. I love the like super segmented audience and like very specific in who you're helping. So that's so cool. For you, if somebody who is like trying to do this, who is like interested in either getting into events or starting their own conference or just, I think that's the general sense, like an event marketing or anything along those lines, what would be 3 things that you would tell them off of your own experience?
Don't do it for money. Right. Like I feel like that's like anything within content creation. Like if you're going to start a podcast, if you're going to start a blog, a lot of people try to do it as their side hustle, but it's like, yes, you can potentially make money, but I think the people that are actually making money never set out to do that. Right. And they don't have the pressure of having to make money. And so they can actually have more authenticity and like more organic growth that will lead you in the long run to maybe making a profit off it. But I would say don't get into events if you're trying to make money. There are a million other ways to make money, right?
With way less overhead.
Exactly. I would also say like, I did not think about this in the beginning, but if you look at other successful events, like one of my mentors was a woman who built up this event called HustleCon. And it started as like a newsletter following, and they grew an audience. And like a lot of people who do successful events, like even World Domination Summit, it started with a blog, and then he wrote a bunch of books, and then he started a podcast. He built an audience that then he could ultimately sell tickets to. I started with no audience, no following. Like for me, it was a real uphill battle because no one knew me from a row of goats. Like I just showed up like, I'm going to do this ridiculous big production. And I was met with a lot of like, who the hell are you? Like you have no credibility.
But at the same time, like that takes such balls. Like you got to commend you for your bravery. That takes a lot of balls.
I think I was like mainly stubborn. I had to call the first year. I called on 150 people to get my 9 speakers because what's crazy is like just so many people I called were like, who the hell are you? And now those people are calling me because they look at Econome and they think it looks badass. And now they're calling me back. Like, remember when we spoke 2 years ago? And I'm like, yeah, you were horrible to me. And so I don't want you on my stage now.
Right. But like what a change in 2 years.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a very quick turnaround, but it sounds like, what side note from the three things you'd say, what do you think was the catalyst for the 2 years, such massive growth? Like what was the thing that changed for you that really allowed it to take off?
I think I got out of my own way in like the marketing of the event. So in the beginning, I just wanted to be an event producer. I didn't want to be an influencer. I didn't want to be a personality. I felt like I was literally creating a stage for the real content creators. And I was just this faceless event producer. But what I realize now is like, I had to put myself out there. I've guested on over 100 podcasts. That's like the main way I market the event. And when people hear my story and they hear me talk about why it's so important to go to an in-person event and the kind of people that you can meet and how it can be life-changing, that's what sells tickets. Like I've gotten all the big names. Mr. Money Mustache spoke on my stage last year. And you know what's crazy? He doesn't sell tickets. I sell
That's
tickets. Right? Like,
insane.
I thought that if I just got all the big names like the Paula Pant and the JD Roth and the Joe Saul-Sehy, and I did get all the big names. And I'm sure it makes some difference when people go to my website and they see that I've got all these like big 5 personalities, but I
Mhm.
gave them discount codes and tracking links, and I can tell you from the data that they are not the ones selling tickets. So I think like me realizing that and having the data to prove that it's actually when people hear me, that's what
Mm.
convinces them to come. And I need to like, I guess, have a little bit more confidence that I do have things to say about money and I can add value and that I'm not just an event producer. Like, I'm the face of the brand. That was a
Mhm.
huge shift in it taking off.
Yeah, that's so cool because I think that's unique. And granted, I'm not well into conferences. The only experience I've had is FinCon, as well as like back when I was in corporate America, going to like my industry conferences, and like the idea of having like a face to a conference, I think is really unique, and that's
Mm,
really cool that you found that as your special sauce of like, no, it's unique because of me. And that's really similar in the influencer creation space too. It's like everybody and their mom has a course on personal finance, but the only reason somebody's going to choose to buy from me versus somebody else, because me, my story,
right.
who they
Yeah.
like me. So it's really cool to hear that also be applicable in the event space.
Yeah.
Very
Absolutely.
cool. So sorry, I interrupted and changed things around. What would be your third tip for somebody who is looking to do what you're doing?
Um, okay. I would say you can't do it by yourself, but you have to be really careful about hiring.
Mm,
So I basically do this event by myself, and most people that produce events at this scale have a team of like 10 people. So it is a huge endeavor to do it alone. But every time I would hire someone, it would be a disaster. Either they would
mm,
misrepresent themselves or they didn't do what they said they were going to do, or I mean, I think a big part of that 40 grand loss was hiring people that were not appropriate. And
mm,
I think it was just a learning curve for me. Like, clearly I'm just bad at hiring. But I also think I waited until I got myself into a really desperate position where I
mm.
just needed help so bad that like the first person that came along that was nice to me, I was like, fine, here's my money, you know?
I
So
gotcha.
I just hired someone like 3 months ago, to help me on social media marketing, and she is amazing. Like, she is doing so much work for me that like, and because she's so talented, it takes her like a quarter of the time that it would take me to do stuff. And she's got
Hmm.
really good ideas. She's super smart. You know, she's working like 10 hours a week. That would have been 30 hours of my time. Right.
Yeah.
And so and I'm still like working very closely with her, but you know, the other thing about hiring that I've realized in my experience with this woman that I hired is I thought she was just going to be taking stuff off of my plate to give me bandwidth to do other things, which that is
Hmm.
absolutely a part of it. But I actually call her my muse because working with her like inspires me so much. She inspires me to like write more. Like, I'm creating more
Mm,
content just because like I'm excited about developing things with her. And
hmm.
so I call her on my website. She's on the team as like my content muse. But I didn't realize that like at being a solo entrepreneur, it's a very lonely thing. And I actually don't have access to my creativity unless I'm talking to another person and working with another
Oh.
person. So it's way more than just outsourcing. It's actually like helping me tap into like my own creativity.
Yeah, that's amazing. How did you find, after having some bad experiences with hiring previously, what did you do that changed? Obviously, you were no longer at a place of desperation, it sounds like.
Right.
But what do you think was like a factor in how you were able, because I agree with you. I think hiring is one of the hardest things that we do as business owners. What was it that allowed you to find this perfect match?
So my 5 friends, really. I mean, when you surround
That's
yourself
amazing.
with other entrepreneurs and people who are living life differently, it's amazing how they'll influence you. So I had a friend who is a content creator and she had hired this woman and I saw her at a Campfire event and she was telling me how she hired this great new person, and I was super skeptical. And we spent an hour, and I walked her through every person I hired and what went wrong with them and why it's never going to work for me and why I'm so hesitant to hire someone else. And she sat there and like told me she shot all of my objections down one by one and explained to me like why this woman is different. I mean, she should like
Nice.
do PR for this woman, because like
Right.
she sold her, because she's a very happy customer, right?
Yeah.
And so then she introduced us and we met, and it was like, okay, let's just give this a shot. And
Yeah.
I think it's who you surround yourself with is so impactful on the decisions that you make and the way you process stuff. Like if you're trying to do it all by yourself, it's just, for me, I'm a very extroverted person. I know that there are people that just are like internal processors, and like maybe that's fine, but I really think you have to surround yourself with other entrepreneurs to like be able to brainstorm and mastermind and talk through the challenges that you're having to get broader perspectives from people you respect.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I love that. And it's such a perfect plug again for in-person events like
Yes.
Econome. So
Yes.
before we get to my final question, plug yourself, tell folks again where they can find you. When's Econome coming up? Give us your promotion on anything.
Yes. So the Econome conference is happening March 17th through 19th of 2023. We are like exactly 5 months away as of the date of this recording. I'm not sure when the actual recording will come out. But we are over halfway sold out 5 months in advance. So that is a very good indication that we will have a full house of over 560 people, which is nuts. So you can go to economeconference.com to get your ticket. And remember that Econome is spelled with an M-E at the end, not an M-Y. So economeconference.com, there you can check out our programming. You can check out our speakers. You can go to our YouTube channel and watch all the speeches from the previous events. And then you can also listen to me every single day on the Optimal Finance Daily podcast, where I will read you articles from other bloggers.
I love it. I pulled it up right here. We'll include links down to both of those things down in the show notes. But so cool. Congratulations, Diana. I mean, that's truly incredible. You're 5 months out. 2 years ago, you were dealing with 4 years now. 2018. Yeah. Dang.
Woo. Yes. So this will be the third event. Obviously, we've had some hoops to jump through with COVID, but it feels like we're out of the woods. Like it feels like people are like ready to like leave their house and go to mass gatherings again. So yeah. I'm very hopeful that this is going to be our year that we really have our full house.
Yay, that's so exciting. How many people do you usually anticipate?
So the first year we had 250 people, which is like, that's nuts considering that like it was my first one and no one knew who I was. The second year we had over 400 people. And so it doesn't feel like that big of a stretch to reach full capacity.
Yeah. And full capacity, what is full capacity?
560.
560. You're totally going to get that.
Yeah.
Heck yes.
Absolutely.
Oh my God. I love that. Well, congratulations on all the progress that you've made. My final question for you is one that I ask everybody, and it's just a little fun question. What is your very first money memory?
I want to say I remember like being in the back seat of my mom's car and her going to the ATM, and she always took out $200 cash every time.
Every single time?
Yeah. Like she
would
always take out $200 of cash. And I remember being amazed by that.
Have you ever asked her why it was always 200? Like why that was the number?
No. And honestly, I never even thought about that until you've asked me this question. Like now I want to text my mom and be like, what's up with this first memory of mine?
Yes, you have to ask her to be like, why was it 200? Like, what was the reason behind that number? Maybe in her head, it was like the only appropriate amount to take out every time.
Maybe now, like just logically thinking about it, like if you're going to pay an ATM fee, better make it worth it, right?
Yeah.
Like take a larger amount out so that you don't have to keep going back.
Yeah, that's funny. Oh my gosh, I love it. I always love hearing people's first money memories because I'm always curious how it impacted them later on in life. That one seems pretty benign though, because like it's not a negative or a positive. It's just like this is a standard. This is maybe that's what allowed you to view money as a tool.
Exactly. It just comes out of the machine. It's just
It
there.
just comes out of this ATM. Oh, I love it. Well, it was an absolute pleasure talking to you today. Thank you so much for coming on the Money Bear podcast.
Thank you.
All right. I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. I think Diana is incredibly inspiring, and I always love to hear what financial independence is to other people. So she's an incredible human. I might need to go to Econome this year, but I hope you guys enjoyed that. And be sure to check out the links down below, connecting you to what she's doing. And as always, since we're talking about personal finance, please keep in mind that nothing that we're talking about here is meant to be construed as financial advice. It's for education purposes only. And you guys know that by now, right? So if you want to see our full terms and conditions, head on over to the show notes where we've got that there. And that's pretty much all I've got for you guys today. If you've made it this far and you're wondering how the heck did Diana and Chloe and all of these people start their finance journey, well, I've got a resource for you. Be sure to head to thelazyinvestorscourse.com/guide to download my free Get Your Money Right guide, where I've got so much information in there. I've got YouTube videos, I've got podcast episodes, I've got blog posts, I've got templates, I've got all the things that you guys ask me for in one place in that free guide. So check it out. And if you get it, let me know what you think. But that's all I got for you guys this week. So I hope you have a good one, and I'll see you next week. Bye.